Today we are talking about Scottie Barnes. Is he a breakout candidate who's going to take the league by storm playing more point guard, or is he going too high in fantasy baskets and will be a bust this season? Let's go!
Jordan open. Chicago with the lead. Bryant to Shaq.
Not a game. We talking about practice.
LeBron James with no regard for human life. Irresponsible!
Back out to Allen. His three-pointer. Bang!
Curry for three. Wow! Unbelievable! Making it rain in New York.
We the North are now we the champions.
Not the destination, it's the journey. Mamba out.
G'day and welcome again to the Ball Boys Fantasy Basketball Podcast. I'm your host, Mitch Casey, and you can find me on Twitter at Ball Boys Fantasy. And today we are going through number 21 of the top 25 most interesting fantasy basketball players leading up to the start of the NBA season. At number 21, we have the third-year Raptor in Scottie Barnes, who is an interesting player for us to talk about. Obviously, he was the Rookie of the Year in his rookie season a couple seasons ago. And the off-season move of Fred VanVleet leaving the Toronto Raptors has gotten a lot of people very excited about what Scottie Barnes can do this season. Are we expected to see more point guard Scottie Barnes this year? And what can we expect from his fantasy basketball value? There's a lot for us to talk about. But before we do, guys, make sure if you haven't already and you're keen to get everything you possibly can, every advantage that you can in your fantasy basketball draft this season, head on over to ballboysnba.com and get yourself a season guide membership. You can either get a platinum membership or a silver membership. Go over and check those ones out. My Dynasty rankings have officially dropped. I've been working on them for a long time, and they have finally arrived. My top 250 Dynasty rankings there. That one is more for category leagues, so go and check that one out there if you are a platinum member. And let me know what you think, guys. If there's anything you disagree with, let me know. Happy to always talk about it. Those ones will be updated throughout the entire season, so I'm going to keep going back to them. I don't want to adjust them too much. I'm cautious about being overreactionary to performances, trades, and things like that from a Dynasty. We want a long-term focus, but I'll probably be checking in them maybe once a month to sort of see how things are shaping out and move some things around where I see fit. So head on over to ballboysnba.com, but let's talk Scottie Barnes. So, Scottie Barnes, he is, hold on, that is not correct. He is not 25 years old. I need to quickly double check that. But he is someone who is going fairly high up in drafts. And an ADP on Yahoo at 55.2. On Fantrax, he is at 55.5, and on ESPN, 54.6. So he is, for the most part, going around that 55 mark across all platforms, which is not something we normally see for players here. In fact, I'm just going to adjust his age there because he is only 22.2 years old. So that is his age there. So at 55 across all sites, pretty easy for us to label him a guy going at the middle of, what would that be? Middle of the fifth round in most standard leagues. Last season, he played 77 games. In that time, he played 34.8 minutes, so minutes were up there, up towards that 35 mark, which we would expect most star players to be playing. In terms of his rankings, for 9 category rankings, he was the 88th ranked player. For -1 rankings, which took out his three-pointers, he was 85th, so not a huge jump there at all. And in Yahoo points leagues, he was the 60th ranked player. So we can already see that he's a much better Yahoo points league player than a category league. It was very similar ranking for his ESPN points league value. So he's a better points league player straight off the bat when it comes to fantasy basketball value. So we can already start to see a bit of a split when it comes to his ADP and the differences in his rankings compared to what format you're playing. So with an ADP of 55, even in a points league, you're expecting him to get a little bit better than what he did last year. A lot of that will be off the back of Fred VanVleet leaving this team, but we're going to talk about today how much does that actually help him, and are we forgetting a piece of the puzzle? Because I think that we definitely are, and we're going to talk about that first here, because the piece of the puzzle that I think is always missed when we're talking about Scottie Barnes is that last year, his stats were affected by the acquisition of Jakob Poeltl at the trade deadline. So Jakob Poeltl was acquired in February when at the trade deadline, and we can have a look at the stats for Scottie Barnes before and after the trade, the trade for Jakob Poeltl, because for the first half, or the first 2/3 of the season, he averaged 15.6 points, 0.93, 7.2 rebounds, 4.8 assists, 1 steal, 0.9 blocks, basically 46% from the field, 77 from the line, which was good for 71st overall when it comes to 9 category rankings. When Jakob Poeltl came across, however, for the final about 20 games of the season, just over 20 games, he averaged 15 points again, 0.6 threes. This is the big one here, 5.5 rebounds, 4.8 assists, 1.2 steals, 0.7 blocks also trended down, 45%, 77% from the free throw line. So that was good for the 109th ranked player in a 9 category setting. So when we look at the year that was for Scottie Barnes, he was pretty solid in the first chunk of the season. 71st ranked player. I think for the most part, he was drafted around that 50-ish, 55, similar to where he's going now. It was a slight disappointment. We expected a bit of a step forward. He took a step back compared to his rookie season. He took a step back in his field goal percentage, but he did increase his assists. His rebounds dropped down. Even before the trade, he was averaging 7.5 rebounds in his rookie season. So even before Jakob came across, it was a slight dip, but that really did drop once Poeltl got there, and just didn't really see any improvement in any of the other numbers. So a bit of a disappointing year for Scottie Barnes all around, because he almost took a step back compared to his rookie season, with the biggest thing being his field goal percentage, going from 49% down to 45.6% on the season. The biggest thing, though, is that we forget to take into account the fact that Jakob Poeltl came across and his rebounds dropped by nearly 2 rebounds per game. So on the season, you look at his average and you think, okay, yep, 6.6 rebounds, but Jakob Poeltl is obviously still there in Toronto. So instead of Scottie Barnes playing more minutes at the 4, with Siakam playing a lot at the 5, they both kind of shifted down, with now Scottie Barnes playing more at the 3, and Siakam playing at the 4 with Poeltl there at the 5. So I expect that to continue. I don't think that that's going to be different compared to what we saw after the trade deadline last year. So always factor that into the case when you're looking at his rankings last year. He's probably going to lose at least a rebound per game from those season numbers, in my opinion, which can offset some of the gains that he might expect to see in his assist numbers. So remember, we're probably grading him on being the 109th ranked player, not the 88th ranked player, which he was for the entire season. So to get to his ranking and his ADP of 55, he has a fair way to go. And he's not someone that gets saved too much in -1 rankings, because he's got a fair few holes in his game. He's not a positive in either percentage category. He's poor in threes. His steals are okay without being elite. His blocks, again, okay without being great, and just isn't a huge scorer. Rebounds, it's all fairly average across the board, with a few negatives in his game. So, someone who I think for at least his category league value gets a little bit overrated, in my opinion. So the next thing we want to discuss here, and the biggest reason why he's getting a lot of hype, well, number one, he's going to his 3rd NBA season. So you would hope to see that he improves a little bit, but again, compared to last year, we actually saw him take a slight step back a little bit as well. So I don't know if we can necessarily guarantee that. I do think that he was a surprise in his rookie year and maybe overperformed a little bit. So I'm not 100% sure how confident I am on him just being this superstar and taking this next leap forward, but there is a little bit of that. But let's talk about Fred VanVleet, obviously leaving this team. The expectation is that Scottie Barnes is going to take a big step up in his assists and be more of the primary playmaker on this team, point guard Scottie. But 2 things we have to figure out and discuss. Number one, you're getting Dennis Schroeder coming back in instead of a Fred VanVleet. So Dennis Schroeder, I expect to maybe step into that starting role. If not, he's going to play significant minutes off the bench as a point guard on this team. You also have the presence of Pascal Siakam, who is probably still, in my opinion, the better playmaker than a Scottie Barnes. His assists, obviously, were better than Scottie's last season, and he is still on this roster despite trade rumors circling him. But as it stands right now, he is someone that I still would expect to get more assists than a Scottie Barnes this season, or at least it'll still be very close. So last year, Pascal Siakam averaged 5.8 assists per game to Scottie Barnes's, what was he? If I just pull him back up here, to Scottie Barnes's 4.8. So he averaged an extra assist per game. So do all the assists just go to Scottie, or does Pascal Siakam benefit a little bit there as well? What I've got up on the screen here for people watching along on YouTube is there were 11 games last season where Fred VanVleet missed and Scottie Barnes played. One of those games was the final game of the season. So I've kind of taken that out because Scottie Barnes only played the 22 minutes in that game and they were kind of just resting their players, not going full tilt. So in the 10 games outside of that, where Fred VanVleet missed and Scottie Barnes played, I wanted to investigate how much did Barnes actually see the benefit of his assists. And across those 10 games, he actually only averaged 4.7 assists in that time, which, compared to his average, is pretty much bang on. He averaged 4.8 for the season, 4.7. He actually took a small step down. Now, again, it's a small sample size, but you would have hoped to at least see some sign of him taking a step forward or seeing an increased role in his playmaking in that time, but we didn't. Now, I still expect for his assists to improve this season, but I definitely don't see him going to someone that's going to average 6.5, 7 assists per game. I think he might get up to maybe 5.3 to 5.5. Maybe he scratches 6 assists per game. But if we compare that with the drop in rebounds down to more that 5.5 rebounds instead of 7.5 rebounds, his value, it kind of just stands around a similar kind of point compared to last year. You factor in maybe a small progression in terms of his usage and getting better as a third-year player. Maybe his scoring goes up from 15 points per game, which he did in back-to-back seasons, his rookie year and his second year. Maybe that it gets up to 17 or 18 points per game, but it's still not enough for us to see a huge improvement from the post-Jakob Poeltl acquisition, 109th ranked player, to 55 where he's getting drafted. I think I said in the teaser yesterday that he is a breakout candidate, and he definitely still is. He's a young player. It would not shock me if he comes out and just improves across the board, but for him to get from that all the way up to where he's being drafted, I have my serious doubts when it comes to category leagues. So he was also, and this was the teaser, he was also in my bus video for category leagues, and that is the reason why. We can expect him to improve, but I don't think he improves enough to justify that ADP position, because again, I don't think he's going to be anything special in any one particular category. His strengths are not standout level strengths to me. He is kind of just a solid guy across the board, decent enough assist player for a wing or a forward eligible position guy, but I don't see him coming out and averaging 24 points per game or upping the steals to 1.5, 1.6 per game. His blocks and rebounds are affected as long as Jakob Poeltl is there. So I just don't see the huge step forward there for him to justify those numbers. So after doing this one, going into it with an open mind, I still think that based on what I've researched here, that he is going to be a bust if you are drafting him at 55 in a category league. If, however, you are drafting him in a points league, then I think it's fine. I think that ADP position in a points league, both ESPN and Yahoo, is totally reasonable and exactly where I think he should be going. Around that 50 to 60 mark, I think is A-okay. If you want to take him a little bit earlier because you think there's a bit more upside, then I don't have any problem with that. But in a category league, which most of these drafts, especially on Fantrax and Yahoo, represent, I think that it is getting much too high compared to what he is doing in a points league. So just remember that depending on what type of league you are in will dramatically change a player like Scottie Barnes. But I think in a general sense, he is someone who is getting overhyped, overexcited about in the fantasy community compared to what he can do for this upcoming season. So nice, short, sweet for us right there. But Scottie Barnes, number 21 on the most interesting fantasy basketball players for the season. So coming up in a second, I'm going to give you guys a hint for who is at number 20. So again, if you have any guesses, and I'm loving all these guesses come through. We've had a few people guess a few of them the day before, which is very switched on people. I think you guys have done a good job there, but I'll give you a hint for that one in a second. Before we do there, though, guys, make sure you give this video a big thumbs up. We are ramping up a lot of content coming up these last 3 weeks before the final weekend before the NBA draft. So if you are enjoying it, if it is helpful, I'd appreciate whenever you can, give this video a big thumbs up, and any video you watch, just send those thumbs up my way. It really, really helps. Make sure if you haven't subscribed, I know a lot of you have been watching my stuff for a long time and haven't hit that subscribe button. I've got a very ambitious goal to get 10,000 subscribers. So if you haven't already, guys, that would be very much appreciated if you can hit that big old subscribe button and help me get there. Let's talk about number 20. Now, my hint for number 20 is I've kind of cheated at number 20 here. I've got not one, but I've got two players together at number 20 who I want to discuss. So I've kind of cheated. That is your hint today. So tomorrow at number 20, we have two players that we're discussing and the most interesting fantasy basketball players. Drop your guesses down below, guys, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye.